Hi, how are you today? My name is Heidi Baillargeon. I'm the Manager of Parks Development for the City of Windsor, and I have Dan Amiconi with me. He is the design consultant from Architects and Engineers who have helped us put together the proposal for the Celestial Beacon. So we'll be presenting the Celestial Beacon to you today, giving you some background and information package regarding the project. As well, we're going to be doing two videos. So the first will be the video and design information package, and the second video will be actual site visit where we can go out and show you the site and show you what the project entails. The purpose of today's presentation is to provide information to the citizens of Windsor regarding the Celestial Beacon and the design for the proposed Celestial Beacon, which will house the new streetcar 351. I'm going to start off by giving you a little bit of background on how the Celestial Beacon came to be and the Central Riverfront Implementation Plan, which is the plan that outlines 5 key beacons that are located along the city's riverfront. The Central Riverfront Implementation Plan is a document that was adopted by Council back in 2000, and there was a lot of public feedback, a lot of public open houses, information sessions with stakeholders, interviews. There was a 3-day design charrette that went into the development of these plans that take into account the entire riverfront from the Ambassador Bridge all the way to Higham Walkers. That encompasses approximately 95 acres of parkland, which is about a 6-kilometer stretch of parkland along the riverfront. So any development that the city does in this park, we consult this document. You may have heard of it referred to as the CRIP, the CRIP plan. And the document lays out design principles and guidelines for how development should occur along the riverfront. So the Celestial Beacon is one of 5 beacons in the plan. It is the furthest beacon located on the west, which is the Celestial Beacon. Moving east, we have the Legacy Beacon, the Peace Beacon, the City Beacon, and the Dawn Beacon. So those are the primary beacons that kind of form the nodes along the riverfront. The Celestial Beacon is situated, as I had mentioned, as the westernmost beacon on the riverfront, and its name is Celestial because it was meant to take in the night sky. There are a number of different elements that are proposed in the plan that this beacon encompasses. So number one, the beacon is proposed to be built into the embankment of Riverside Drive. It's supposed to have an observation tower as well as a seating area like a plaza out front. Public washrooms are located here. All the beacons along the riverfront have our primary information stations. So they're kind of hubs, gathering spaces that you'll find along the riverfront where people can go. They can grab a quick bite to eat, perhaps, maybe a drink. They can kind of orient themselves, maybe collect information if they're not familiar with the area. And they help orient pedestrians along the parkland that is down at the riverfront. So the Celestial Beacon, located at the foot of Askin along Riverside Drive, is built into the embankment. There are a lot of site design considerations that we had to take into account when designing the site. One of the major design considerations was accessibility. There is a 19-foot grade elevation difference between the crown of Riverside Drive and the height of the riverfront walkway, which is the multi-use trail that runs all the way along the riverfront. That elevation difference posed some challenges, but as well as some opportunities in terms of planning this site and the proposed building that would go into the site. So it was actually really ideal that there was that 19-foot elevation difference so that we were able to hide the majority of the building and build it into the embankment, which is what the Central Riverfront Implementation Plan calls for. We were also it made it easier to be able to provide that observation deck that provides spectacular views to the riverfront. There's actually no place on the riverfront that you can go and be this close and have spectacular views while enjoying a beverage at the end of the day or something to eat. So you've got the Detroit skyline and the Detroit River off to the east, and to the west you have a beautiful view of the Ambassador Bridge. So the observation deck, the elevation change made it easy to be able to provide that. Some of the challenges with that as well came into account with accessibility. But I think the overall plan that you'll find that we're presenting here today really integrates all angles of this building and the site very well. We looked at different modes of transportation, how people would be coming here, whether it be by car, walking, biking, rollerblading, skateboarding. We looked at all modes of transportation and made sure that the pathways, not only the multi-use pathway, but all the walkways were integrated, and that you could get to all design elements of the building seamlessly and easily. So The building does meet all the facility accessibility design standards as well as AODA guidelines and regulations, and it does a really good job of integrating that. The multi-use trail that runs along the riverfront, we wanted to make sure as well that that was kept open and unobstructed. A lot of development on the riverfront, sometimes it can pose some challenges to do that, but in this particular design, we've proposed the terraces so that they're just slightly elevated above that multi-use trail. So if you're actually sitting on the terrace enjoying the night sky at the end of the night, you have an unobstructed view to the east and to the west, and you can see right over the heads of anybody that might be biking by, walking by, cycling by on that multi-use trail. So that was another really important design consideration to take into account when designing the building and designing the site context. There's public washrooms located here as well as a concession stand. So we haven't really finalized the details on what the concession stand will entail, but we're hoping that alcohol will be served here and you'll be able to grab a bite, something to eat, and come out and enjoy the views. There are some milestones with this project too that we've hit to date. So kind of how the whole thing came together. The streetcar was donated to the city in October of 2017, and the city had hired RM Restorations to completely restore it. At the same time, the city launched a public open house in January 2018, and at this time we didn't really know where the streetcar was going to be located, but there was multiple locations that were discussed, and it was open to public forum in terms of where people would really like to see it reside after it was fully restored. We collected information in terms of a survey that was open for approximately a month, just over a month, and we brought it back to council at June 4th, 2018 at a council meeting. At that council meeting, it was decided that the Celestial Beacon was the best fit. It kind of brought together Windsor's rich history with the streetcar, as well as providing a cultural piece for the Celestial Beacon as something that could be integrated into that site. And at that point, we were instructed, the city was instructed to go forward and do some investigative work and see how plausible was it to fit the streetcar down here, number one. What were the design constraints and what were the site constraints? Was it possible? I'm going to turn it over to Dan, who will give you a background now on the building itself and some of the different design elements of the building.
From a building design standpoint, we wanted to, as Heidi mentioned, sort of start with the the Celestial Beacon programming. And again, there's a specific mandate that's prescribed within the city that was offered by the CRIP planning that we needed to sort of follow. Number one was to reduce the overall impact of the building. And what that means is kind of looking at the overall size and footprint of the building to make sure that it's as least disruptive as possible in terms of the location. We wanted to retain views of the Detroit skyline. We wanted to also blend and coincide with the present landscape of the sculpture garden, which was really important to us because, again, that's the key feature along Riverside Drive that's so important today. And then lastly, we want to minimize the height above grade to preserve the views of the riverfront. The numbers that we have in terms of when we were designing the building is roughly above 7.5 feet above the crown of the road along Riverside Drive. That's how high the building is at the center of the road. So you can tell that that's a very, very low, unassuming building. From the CRIP planning, in terms of what it had to further provide, is to sort of look at the building and how to site it. So it offered some recommendations in terms of providing the site and locating the building into the riverbank, and again to reduce the impact or the overall impact of the building above grade. Also, it also recommended providing a nurse shelter design, and what that would be is something that would be focused towards energy efficiency. Again, as you can understand, is that the shelter design provides a focus towards energy efficiency because of it's mostly buried into the ground. Also, the other thing was to sort of look at, in terms of a recommendation, to provide a rooftop landscape terrace. So we can use that as an observation deck to focus towards Riverside Drive. And again, that was to sort of look at maximizing and capturing scenic views and sunsets of riverfront and the night sky. When you think of celestial beacon, the celestial aspect is to sort of look at, stargazers in terms of the night sky, and sort of looking at a key location in terms of providing that aspect, from the observation deck. And also there's amenity spaces or support spaces that are also with this. And what they would be is washrooms and concession stands, a possible dining terrace on the riverfront, sort of overlooking the water's edge. Another key aspect of the CRIP planning was to sort of preserve the existing pedestrian trail and the walkways along Riverside Drive, and respective views of the riverfront and each intersecting street along Riverside Drive. So if you think back to the site plan and sort of where every street intersects Riverside Drive, we want to make sure that the vista as you approach Riverside Drive is cleanly kept and sort of open as possible. From the streetcar gallery perspective, in terms of its recommendations, we needed to provide a gallery space to accommodate the streetcar 351. And what that means is a building that sort of looks at we can't physically build this building while the streetcar is in place. So we have to create a design where we can actually move it into place once the building is completed. There'll be an event terrace with a licensed concession stand that also translates from the building. And as I mentioned before, we wanted to reduce the footprint and reduce the above grade portion. So what we've done is provided a building that is mostly below grade, and more specifically around 70% below grade. And again, to understand that if we keep most of the building below grade, we have a very small portion of the building kind of escalating above grade. That's only the remaining 30% of the building program. So if we think of the 4,800 square feet of building program, mostly would be below grade. And then lastly is to sort of look at whatever projection element is above grade is providing mostly a connotation towards making sure that we can utilize that as a sculpture building to kind of coincide with the sculpture garden and provide a little bit of transparent glass that creates this harmony with the current sculpture garden. So that was kind of the key aspects of the gallery portion of this of the program. And then the last point is in terms of the building design, we wanted to design a building that meets the current 2030 challenge. And what that is basically involving reducing the carbon footprint and our dependency on fossil fuels. So it's something that is key in the sort of the 2030 challenge, to sort of focus on something that is lessening the carbon footprint. We hear that today in terms of providing good, sound, energy efficient buildings, and something that we wanted to target on this building. Again, key design targets, we take a look at providing some solar shading, some baffles to produce the sort of the effects of sun on the building, and incorporate high albedo surfaces like grass and sort of low reflective surfaces to really reduce the heat island effect, or the effect of the landscape, if you will, onto the building. And then the last point is really to sort of understand that the ultimate goal here is to produce an efficient design strategy with a low EUI, or energy use intensity, which is really the operational cost of the building year to year. So that's in a nutshell in terms of the design, and I'll turn it back to Heidi.
So the information package that you're seeing today is the overall design and the proposal of the Celestial Beacon itself, how that's integrated, housing the streetcar into this site. And we're going to take a run out to the actual site itself to give you a better perspective on what you'll actually see on the site, and kind of take you through a little virtual tour on site, so you can get a good feel as to some of the views that you might see and the space that it will encompass.